This weekend, Tom Verlaine, my all-time favorite guitarist, passed away. He was the guitarist of the legendary band Television, so I thought it would be a good idea to review Television's legendary album, Marquee Moon, one of my all-time favorite albums. And I'm really not kidding when I say that Tom Verlaine is my all-time favorite guitarist. I'm not just saying that because he just passed away and I'm feeling particularly emotional about him. I really do mean that. If any time in the past 5 years you ask me who is my favorite guitarist, I would have said Tom Verlaine immediately. Not just because his guitar work in Marquee Moon and in Television is phenomenal, but because his music actually really helped me learn how to play guitar better. Every musician is gonna get to the point where they plateau. You've been playing for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and you're at a certain skill level. Maybe you're pretty good, but you obviously know you could get better. And the big question is, how do I get better? What should I practice to get better? It's actually a really hard thing. It's like, I know I could get better, but I don't know how. 6 years ago, I was at that point. I felt like I plateaued at the guitar. So I sat down and I loved this record so much, I decided to pick up my guitar and try playing some of the riffs on it. And I'm not even kidding. Playing what I was hearing on this record single-handedly skyrocketed me at guitar playing. And from there, I was able to break out of my plateau and just get better and better, because Tom Verlaine, throughout this record, he is shredding. He is playing with the Mixolydian guitar mode. So playing this record helped me understand what it means to play modally. It helped me understand jazz. It helped me understand rock. It helped me get better at punk. Like, literally, this record, I would recommend, if you think you're pretty good at guitar but you want to get better and you want to understand how these things fit together, this record right here, for a million reasons, and I'm gonna get into it. It's just like, this record is just legendary beyond belief. So let's go ahead and start by taking a look at the album cover. I love this cover because it just is so like dark and bold, and it's very post-punky. You know, lots of people will say this album was post-punk before post-punk was a thing. And I mean, you look at this cover, they look goth. They got like, it's a real dark cover. They got like dark shadows on their face and stuff. They almost look like My Chemical Romance. The music is definitely it has a pretty dark atmosphere too. Some of it's actually kind of dancey a little bit here, just a tinge of kind of a new wave quirkiness coming through the record, especially in the vocals. It's like such like a cerebral, intellectual album that is very serious at the same time as being really fun and catchy. I feel like the album artwork really captures that mood of like, prepare your ass to sit down and listen to a real, like, they're like, we're about to blow your mind with our guitar playing and our epic songs. Like, they look like they know they are about to fuck you up. That's what the album cover to me looks like. A lot of people will say that this record was post-punk before punk was really even a thing, so it's like super ahead of its time, and it's really not that much of an exaggeration. So this record came out in 1977. It's definitely very art punk, post-punk, weird, noodly, strange, artsy, experimental punk vibes. And 1977 was the same year that the Sex Pistols released their album, that the Clash released their debut album, so like a lot of the defining albums of punk came out at the same time. And lots of people will say that's a sign that Television just were way ahead of their time. Obviously true, but I honestly think it's kind of a flex of how much better New York City punk was than British punk, in terms of New York City was really the origin of punk, folks. I'm not gonna lie, because English punk was just getting their foot through the door in 1977. But Television, you have to really understand it as a product of the scene that it was coming out of, because New York City punk at this time was already like really a solidified scene. So you had the Velvet Underground, the Ramones, Patti Smith, you had Richard Hell, the Heartbreakers, oh, of course, the New York Dolls. So there was already a lot of like punk, funky, experimental, edgy energy in New York City, releasing albums in the early 70s and in the mid 70s, and then you get to 1977, and it almost feels like with Television's album Marquee Moon, it's like you're building up. We've got this really cool artsy scene that's really edgy and fun and crazy and wild in New York City, and then you take all that chaotic energy and you combine it with Tom Verlaine's absolute genius guitaring, and it's almost like, this is almost like the progressive rock masterpiece of the New York City 70s punk scene, because it feels so much like a 70s New York City punk record. But while a lot of New York City punk in the 70s were super just like very much rock and roll inspired, very much just bringing back the old school rock and roll and not trying to do anything too psychedelic and crazy like the Beatles were in the 60s, it feels like you take that kind of rough and edgy, let's do a lot of drugs and have a lot of sex, weirdo energy of New York City punk, and then you just take it to the next level of complexity. From start to finish throughout this record, you're just gonna hear Tom Verlaine and the whole band just kind of like doodling on really complex riffs. It's like, okay, this song is really catchy, you can kind of dance to it, it's really fun, it's really quirky, that's all great, but you just kind of listen to the background and you hear like the guitar just going like, it's like, the guitarist is hitting a million notes, and he's playing on like jazzy scales. Like I said, it's a mixolydian mode. I don't feel like explaining that to you. I just know that because I learned how to play these songs. It's weird. It's just like they're just playing a lot of notes, and it's crazy because that might be too much. If you're a guitarist in a band, a lot of times less is more. A lot of the times just playing little power chords here and there helps give the band more space so it's not distracting. I would sit down and be like, oh man, this is kind of like, oh man, you're Tom Verlaine, you're playing a lot of notes. Do you think that's going to take away from the music? Somehow, the complex melodies of the guitar are really catchy and somehow like fuse perfectly with the vocal melodies and fuse perfectly with the bass lines. And it's just like, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like progressive rock. Like, it's not really progressive rock, but just like the puzzle pieces they're combining into a record so cohesively. It's like, it's almost like an intellectual masterpiece in that sense. It's a very intellectual, musically complex record, and that's all happening on the background. And then up front with the vocals, it's just so quirky. Like I can't even do his voice right, but it's just like that classic, quirky, weirdo, anxious vocalist that has like come to define what post-punk and post-punky new wave is all about. We all can think of a million post-punk vocalists who are kind of quirky and weird. That is like Tom Verlaine is doing that way before everybody else was, and not only was he doing it before everybody else was, he was doing it on top of a band that was playing stuff that was like really complex. A lot of these riffs are super angular. You might hear a music critic when they're describing math rock or certain post-hardcore records describe the riffs as angular. You might not know what that means. Well, you can kind of think of like a melody that goes like, it's like a smooth melody versus an angular riff, which is like. This album is super angular, like. It's like whoa. I don't know. It just reminds you of an angle. I don't know why. Okay, but that's what's going on. It's like it pleases the intellectual side of you that likes angles. I'm doing freaking geometry right now while listening to this record, and then it pleases the more emotional, anxious side of you who can really vibe with this vocalist who just sounds like so tender and anxious, but it sounds like he's kind of dancing at the same time, like classic, just the classic post-punk vibe of I'm anxious, but these bass lines are groovy and we're gonna dance on top of it. And then somehow through these songs, these are actually just, these are really just straightforward indie rock songs. At the end of the day, they take complicated elements and fuse them into really cohesive indie rock songs with verses and choruses that you can sing along to and have fun to. It's very accessible at the end of the day. And then every once in a while in their very accessible, fun indie rock album, they'll just have a guitar solo that's like just to remind you, like, yeah, by the way, yes, this is fun, quirky indie rock, post-punk music, rock and roll, but we're kind of fucking incredible at our instruments, and we're gonna flex that to you. And you think this is good now? Wait till you get to the song Marquee Moon. Marquee Moon, the song Marquee Moon on the album Marquee Moon. This is a 10-minute song, and this to me feels like the masterpiece of 70s New York punk. Like all the excitement and energy and creativity coming from New York punk, all just accumulates to this 10-minute masterpiece. And I mean, it's just a beautiful song, very beautiful, melodies and guitar riffs and everything sounds great, but what really kind of takes it away and just blows you away and makes it like one of the best songs of all time is the guitar solo, because at some point in the song everything just kind of drops off and there's like a guitar solo that just builds and builds, starts like a little, just a little doodling around here, a little doodling around here, and the whole band, there's just such a wonderful chemistry where that guitar solo just builds and builds. It's a 10-minute song. A lot of that song is just the guitar just building, just guitar solo building up, and the drums, building up too, just letting everything kind of build up. The bass is building up. It's a crescendo. It's just a crazy, mind-blowing crescendo, and then the end you get the it's just like shimmering. It's like an explosion of light. It's like we're all just having a giant, massive 10-minute orgasm together with this incredible guitar playing. It's like this freaking genius. Like, it's literally like, if you're someone who needs lyrics and vocals in order to feel emotion through music, and you don't believe that you can be emotionally moved by just instrumentation alone, sit down and listen to the song and focus on the guitar solo and listen to just how powerful and moving. And it's just like, he's doing such cool, crazy, like weird, like shaking the strings and jiggling the things and just making the whole freaking universe explode, and the drums are just everything is just going so freaking hard. And like I said, if you're up for it and you want to get better at guitar, maybe pick up your guitar and try to learn some of this guitar solo, and you're gonna be like, God damn, this shit is really cool. It's really cool. It's just bringing together like my favorite things, which is like the classic 70s New York City punk experimentation weirdness that was, foreshadowing no wave coming soon in the early 80s in New York City. This is definitely proto no wave, so another way it's ahead of its time. Bringing that weirdness and then fusing it with like sheer talent, just extreme levels of just, you are a master at guitar, you are a master at songwriting, you could play progressive rock, you could play jazz. That's where they're like, you're taking like extreme talent and bringing it to a genre that frankly doesn't need any talent. Like the Ramones, they didn't necessarily know how to play their instruments, but they could still play, because punk is frankly, sometimes it's more about your heart and soul rather than it is about technical proficiency. Marquee Moon brings extreme technical proficiency to that genre and maxes both out. And that is that is Marquee Moon, the masterpiece of 70s New York punk. Changed everything. To me, this is like I said, like the UK. Let's make fun of the UK. The UK were like, oh, we invented punk. Yo, you came out in 1977 with the Sex Pistols and the Clash. Meanwhile, New York City punk was busy evolving their punk to the point where they made Marquee Moon. They were 15 steps ahead of you. Punk was invented in New York City, period. Just my little thing. So that's all I have to say. Obviously, this record is a 10. It means a lot to me. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it. Definitely give it a listen. Think about it. I think it's a beautiful record on its own. I think it's beautiful in the context of the fact that it was ahead of its time and also very much a product of its time in New York City. I'm a big fan of New York City punk, obviously. It's a lot of my favorite bands. I live in New York City and play punk, so I kind of like to pretentiously think of myself as somehow a product of the scene, even though that's not true. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Like, comment, subscribe. Awesome record. Tom Verlaine, my favorite guitarist. Rest in peace. You're a legend. Punk Revolution now.